Morning students. Today we'll start the new chapter matter in our surroundings in class 9 chemistry, and today I will tell you about the what is matter, what are the different states of matter and what are the different properties of matter. So before starting this chapter I want to tell you what is matter. Actually the lesson is matter in our surroundings. So you all know that there are several things around us, either in the solid form, liquid form or gaseous form. There we are taking, they are in the gaseous form, the water we drink is in the liquid form, and the various solid objects which are around us, outside as well, they are all made up of solid. Now, what is actually matter? Matter is anything which has mass and occupies space. So, anything which has mass and occupies space is called matter. And whether it is a gas, solid or liquid, every matter is made up of, we can say they are made up of very small particles which are called atom. And there are three states of matter: solid, liquid and gas. Previously in the ancient time, the ancient philosophers used to tell that the whole living or non-living organisms, they are made up of 5 elements, and these are air, earth, fire, sky and water. Means the whole earth is made up of these 5 elements, which is called Panch Tattva. And this matter, whether it is a solid, liquid or gas, it is made up of tiny particles. And there are various evidence that these tiny particles, how they can be seen. So they are very small, they are so minute that they cannot be seen by the naked eyes. And if we take the example of how we can see that the particles are there and how the particles mix with the other substance or the other liquid, like if we take the example of water as well as potassium permanganate, KMnO4, and if we take a piece of KMnO4 in the glass of water and try to mix it, what will happen? The particles of this KMnO4, that is potassium permanganate, will mix with the water. Means the small particles of this get diffuses in the water we have taken in the jar or in the glass, and what will happen after few minutes, these particles of potassium permanganate, they get mixed in the water and make the water purple color, because the color of the potassium permanganate is purple. So slowly and slowly, due to diffusion, what happens, the particles of these potassium permanganate get mixed with the water, and slowly the color of the water turns into purple. And after some time, what happens, the whole water gets changed into purple color. So this is the Brownian motion, or we can also say it is the process of diffusion. Diffusion means mixing of two particles together. Here one particle of the water and another is the particles of the potassium permanganate. So what we have seen that here both are matter, the water is also a matter, liquid form of matter, as well as potassium permanganate is also the solid form of matter. So when we try to dissolve the potassium permanganate in water, what will happen? The particles get slowly mixed with the water and make the water purple color. So this is called mixing of the two different forms of the matter, that is either liquid or solid, or two gases also we can mix. Like if we burn the incense stick in the room, what will happen? The gases which are produced by burning the incense stick, they spreads in the air which are present in the room, and that's why we are able to smell the fragrance of that incense sticks, and that is called also the example of the diffusion. Diffusion means mixing together or spreading of the two particles together, either it may be two gases or solid and liquid or anything. So this is also the example of the Brownian motion. Another example we can take of the Brownian motion, like if we take a closed room and the sunlight is coming from any hole or any side, So what will happen? The particles or the dust particles which are present in that room or outside, they also enter along with the sun rays. So these particles are moving constantly. Means that is also the particles, and it is also a matter. And because of this, we can see that because of the sun rays or the sunlight, these particles are visible to us. So these are the dust particles. So this is also one of the example of the Brownian motion. So by this, what we see that the matter is made up of tiny particles. Either it is a solid or liquid or gas. All matter is made up of tiny particles. Like if we take the example of a drop of water. If we take a drop of water, that is also made up of millions of tiny particles of that water, which form that tiny drop of water. So, and another thing what we conclude from this is that the particles of matter are constantly moving. They are moving, they are not at one place, they are moving constantly, like the dust particles which we see in the closed room when the sun rays comes inside. So they are moving, they are not at one place, they are moving along with the air here and there. In the same way, like we have just put the potassium permanganate in the water, what happened? The particle starts moving, continuously moving, and because of that the color of the water turns into purple color. So these two things we have seen, that all matter is made up of tiny particles, and secondly that particles of matter are constantly moving. Now this by this example also we can conclude that the characteristics of particles of matter are very small. Very small means if we are mixing this potassium permanganate in water, or in place of potassium permanganate we can also take this salt, sodium chloride, or we can also take the sugar particle. So what will happen when they get mixed with the water? The particle becomes very tiny, and then only they are able to mix with the water, and so we are able to take taste the sweetness of that water. If we mix the sugar in water, we can taste the sweetness of that sugar in water, because the particles are totally mixed. In the same way, when we add salt in the water, so we are able to smell the taste the that saltiness of that water. That means the water becomes salty. So because the particles of the salt or the sugar, they get totally mixed in the water, and that's why means they break into smaller and smaller particles, and because of that they mix with the air, and we can get the taste of that water, or we can see the color changes in that particular solution. So by this what we see that the particles of matter, they are very small. They are very minute, even in means microscopic we can say, and the particles have space between them. Space between them, like here we are adding the potassium permanganate or sugar or salt, whatever we can add in the water. They dissolve in water. So we all know that in the liquid the particles are loose like this. Here the particles are loose. So what happens when we add sugar or salt or potassium permanganate? The particles of that sugar, salt or potassium permanganate, they occupy the space between these two particles, and that's why they have means what we see that here there is a space between the particles. So that's why the sugar particles which get mixed with the water, they occupy that space between these particles. And that's why the level of the water remains the same even if we add the sugar or salt or potassium permanganate in this 1 glass of water. The level of the water remains the same because these particles of sugar, salt or potassium permanganate, they have occupied this particular space between them. So that is also the thirdly that these particles of matter are constantly moving. Like here, moving means that by the process of diffusion only they are mixing together, like in the example of the fragrance stick, incense stick, we can take that the particles, they are moving. If we heat the incense stick, what happens? If we burn the incense stick, the particles of that incense stick, they convert into vapor form and they get mixed with the air. Means they are moving, and Continuously they are moving, constantly they are moving, whether it is a solid, liquid or gas. But here the difference is that in solid the particles are very close, so they cannot move from their position, so they move in their own place here like this, because there is no interparticle space. Whereas in the liquid there is some little space between the particles, so they can move, means water can be flown. But in the gases the particles are very free. So that's why in gases the particles can move randomly. So here the difference is that in solid we can say that the particles move in their own position. The liquid moves where the space is there, that's why the liquid can be flown. And in gases the particles are very free. So gases the particles they can move freely. So this is the main difference. And the fourth point is that the particles of the matter attract each other. Attract each other means one particle they attract with the other particle. Then only they can get mixed with each other. Like here the particles of the potassium permanganate or the sugar or salt, they get attracted with the particles which are present in the water, and that's why the color due to diffusion or due to the Brownian motion or the movement of the particles, what happens, the color of the water changes. So this way we can say that the particles of the matter they attract each other. So difference will be seen in solid, liquid and gas. What difference is of the force of attraction? That in solid the particles are very close, so force of attraction will be greater here because no interparticle space is present that much. And in liquid there is some space between that, so they attract, but they have little force of attraction in comparison to the solid. But in gases there is more space between the particles, so the particles will attract more in the means the force of attraction is very least, we can say, in the gases. So force of attraction is more in solid than liquid and then in gases. So by this what we conclude that there is a the characteristics of the particles of matter are the particles of matter, they are very small. Second, the particles of matter have space between them. And third, the particles of matter they are constantly moving. And fourth, we say that the particles of matter they attract each other. So this is all about the characteristics of the particles of matter. In the next class I will tell you about the properties of solid, liquid and gas.